All right. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Sarah Centrella Show. I have an amazing guest for you guys today. I'm super excited to have this conversation. We have a mutual friend in common, Justin, who connected us, who's also been on my show. So welcome to the show, ALILEVINE. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here too. And I love your show and everything you're doing.
Oh my gosh, I've been kind of insta stalking you. So guys, go right ahead and follow my lead. And for those of you who don't know, Ali, I mean, you've done, my God, everything. I mean, celebrity stylist. So you've styled some of the biggest names in Hollywood, in music, in modeling. You've worked with brands like, Coach and Talbot. So you've done it on that side as well. But it looks like you're evolving, as all of us women do, a little bit, right? Because you have a
Yeah.
role of mom, which
Yeah.
changes kind of everything. I'm a mom as well.
Everything.
I'm a mom of three, and it's like, whoa, doesn't that throw a spin on it? So we have, I mean, there's just so much that I want to get into today. You've obviously been featured in all the big, magazines and all of that.
Thank you.
But I think the thing, and my listeners know this, what I'm always most fascinated by with anybody that I meet who's following their heart or following their dreams or making their life happen is, where did it start? Like, we never wake up in the success, right? The success is
No.
a long journey.
No.
Most of the time, it's a journey that nobody has any idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so behind the scenes. So can you start there with us a little bit? Tell us a little bit about kind of your backstory, how you got into, we'll start with maybe styling, and what drove you to initially follow your passion, right? It's probably a different
Yeah.
road than everyone else was taking that you knew back, when you started.
Yeah, for sure. First off, I love that you said, it's success because I mean, everyone's like, oh, the quote of success happens overnight. I'm like, this is the longest night of my life. I mean, I feel like like you were saying with the
Yes.
evolving, I'm still going, I'm still evolving, I'm still growing, I'm still getting to be even more successful. Like people like when they follow me and they reach out, I'm like, oh, I want to be successful with you and I want to be quote unquote famous and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, first off, I never sought out for that. And second off, I still don't consider myself. I have to laugh when people say that to me because I'm like, look, I'm just another woman like anyone else who works really hard and is super passionate about what she shares and does. And I do believe, God has put a lot on my heart to share and has helped with my success. And I think with styling, fashion was always my passion. I have loved fashion since I was a young girl. My grandmother, who my first daughter Amelia is named after, was like my very best friend. She's on the other side now, and she's my angel. And she was like just always showing me fashion. We would do sewing, crocheting, look at design. I was oil painting. I really got inspiration from her. She just always looked fabulous and put together. And so I didn't obviously know what a stylist was when I was young, but I was just always loved fashion. And so that kind of like led me forward to always checking out different things in magazines and what was going on in the fashion world, going to fashion shows, studying fashion in school. And then my first job was with Target, my first like real big girl job, if you will. My first internship that led to an executive position with them. And I was just interning for them for their executive soft lines, which is like their, fashion department. And it was funny because I was in college and I was the president of Northern Arizona Merchandising Association, NAMA, in Northern Arizona. It's a whole other story about how I wound up out there. We'll just say, follow the guy that I shouldn't have wound up in Arizona and then was actually New York. But shorten
You've
that
done that,
just a
right?
little bit. Not the husband now, thank God. And so I was at school in Arizona and I was kind of like this big fish in a small pond because I was from New York. I knew fashion. I knew what I was talking about. So I really got to like take the reins of the fashion club. And I was looking for jobs for all different people that were in the club. And I met with Target for other girls. And I just ended up falling in love with their program and just happened to be right place, right time. And they were like, well, we'd love to have your other girls too, but like, what about you? And so I applied and, I luckily, was accepted and I started my internship with them. And that was kind of the first real big girl job and road to fashion, it led me to doing, the retail executive softline side, learning so much in corporate, doing, softlines, planograms, retail, everything. Because when you are an executive, at Target, you run as a manager, you run the floor, you do the planograms, you're with logistics for the truck, like you do it all. And it was an amazing experience. And it was where I started. And then I realized, like, you know what, this is really good. I'm doing well, but like in my heart is not feeling it. I feel like I'm just kind of in this like hamster wheel motion. Nothing's happening, even though I was so successful for being like, I don't know, 20, 21 years old. Like I remember my parents were like, you're going to give up like an almost 90 grand job. What are you nuts? And I was like,
Right.
I
They're
might
like,
be
that's what our
nuts.
dreams of. Yeah.
Yeah. I might be nuts, but you know what? Like I didn't feel it. And Target was an amazing company, but it just wasn't resonating anymore. And I turned to them and I said, I really want to get more into, I think, the corporate side because I want to do design because I studied design and merchandising and all this stuff in school. And they were like, well, you'd have to go to Minnesota for that. And I'm originally from, New York. And I was like, oh, I don't know. It's a little cold. And like, we should go and experience it. So I did. And I think I experienced just about enough where they said, make sure you're covered up because it's 10-degree wind chill and you need to, make sure all your skin is covered. And I was like, and back to New York.
Yeah. And you're like, and I'm coming from Arizona. No.
Yeah,
Not
exactly. I was like,
happening.
yeah, not happening. So that was like the next thing that led me to now looking into corporate. I kind of had to start over, long story short, because even though I had an incredible resume of retail, I didn't have anything in corporate. So I had to kind of humble myself and start over. Started working for Fragments, which was a private label jewelry company. And so private label, for anyone that doesn't know, basically you're designing for Saks, Neiman Marcus, Aeropostale, Banana Republic, but you're doing the designing and they're putting their label on it. So I was behind that. I was an assistant on that, and I got to work on that project and work on many different amazing brands. And that was kind of my start into the design world. And then from there, I worked with Coach and Talbots, as you mentioned, and Lacoste and many others, and got to work on all these different teams. And then the stock market crashed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my God. It's like, here's what I love first and foremost is that, um, not only did you follow your heart initially to go do something that you really loved, something that resonated with you as a child, I think a lot of us, whatever it is that we're passionate about as a child, we leave behind, right? I think
Yeah.
most people do. Most people
We're
do.
told
Yeah,
we're
we're told
told,
to
right? Like,
like, oh, that's silly.
let it go, you don't need it. But now it's funny, right? Like, I feel like
Yeah.
now more people are conscious to like this inner child and like actually
Yeah.
playing with that and allowing that. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thinking about the people that I know who are really successful. Most of them are, and I know I am doing something that I kind of thought about. It's a different avenue, right?
Yeah.
But essentially the same thing that I was thinking about when I was 10 years old.
Yeah,
But
that's
I think
awesome.
a lot of times, that is
It's poo-pooed. It's like, no, just get a big girl
yeah,
job. I mean, even my parents, love them to death. But like when I was leaving Target, they're like, you have money in savings. You are living home. You're making killer money. You have a great job. You're on your way to district manager, which would be like double the money. Like you're insane. And I was
yeah.
like, maybe, but I'm not happy. And I
You're
think
following
that
that intuition.
yes, I think there
Yeah.
is a time where you have to ask your heart and have to connect to yourself and your God-given intuition and say, is this right for me? Do I really want to be doing this? Now, I understand for many people that they can't switch something immediately, and that's fine. And
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to have that you have to be willing to have that conversation with yourself at some point if you do feel like I want something to change. Otherwise, you just stay in what it is because you're choosing to stay in that uncomfortable comfort level.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. And in your career, just even the research that I've done on you, and mine is very much the same too. I feel like I'm reinventing myself probably every 5 years, and now for a
What makes me
while,
Maverick too.
yeah, for a while it was something I was embarrassed of or ashamed of because that was not the norm when I was growing up. Like you
Yeah.
said, the norm was like go get the real job
Right.
and be done with
What are
it.
you
Call it
doing? You're a dreamer. You're all over the place. I mean,
yeah,
I've heard it all. I've heard it all. And I think that you have to in my opinion, you have to like really look at those as limiting beliefs. Some of them are given to you, some of them are within us, but whatever they are, they're limiting beliefs. And you're choosing to allow them to come into your life to then dictate what your life is and what it looks like and what you're going to be doing. And if you do that, you just have to know that's what you're subscribing to. And yes,
absolutely.
it is harder to dream. Yes, it is harder to create and do the things that you and I do, but you have to choose to want it. You have to have the same passion I had to start in fashion to just go forward and say, this is what I want, and I'm going to go balls to the wall with it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least I can say I did it instead of I wish I tried this, or I wish I did this, or whatever it may be. And a lot of people say to me, like, well, how do you, when you reinvent yourself, how do you handle like your own ego because you were such a stylist and now you're mom? And I'm like, look, I'm not going to lie. I had a lot of like demons to face when all that changed for me. I mean, I went through heavy postpartum depression, I had a lot I had to really deal with and take on. But again, this comes back to coming back to our intuition, right? And trusting in ourselves before listening to the noise and everything else outside that's telling us no matter what it is that you can't do it, you're not enough, it's never going to happen, because that's what the world tells us, unfortunately. So we have to be able to tap into our intuition and say, yes, I can, yes, I will, and watch me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you are awake to listening to yourself, to your gut, to your heart, to whatever it is, and you feel that call, right? That kind of initial spark of passion, whether it comes through an idea,
Yeah.
or sometimes it'll wake me up
A
in the middle of the
download.
night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
comes through all different kinds of things, and you just know, when you know, and I'm sure at
It
your
resonates, right? You
yeah,
feel
yep. And I
it.
think the reason why we know is because we've been acting on those, you know, for throughout our life. And we
Yeah.
know when we don't,
Yeah.
that's when we're really unsatisfied and we feel like we're really stuck or stale.
Right.
When we're acting,
Scale.
whether it's
Yeah.
successful or
Yeah.
not, we're
Mhm.
alive. Like we're
That's
on
right.
fire.
Because
We're
you're
alive.
aligned, right? At your highest, your highest self, and you can feel it and you know it and you're excited about it and you're energized, right? And I realize even myself, I love what you said about stale. I realized for myself with the recreating myself over and over again, it's when I start to feel stale. It's when all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this, I don't have passion for this anymore, or I need to reinvent this, or I need to change this. I mean, like, and I think a lot of times people feel like they should just stay in what they're in because it works, quote unquote, or there's nothing wrong. But why do we have to wait for something to be wrong to then change it? Why can't it be like you were just saying, where you just feel like, you know what, maybe something's stale, or maybe I do want to reinvent this, or I want to change this, and tap into ourselves more. And again, in my opinion, like outside society, all the programs around us, they've been telling us for years that you don't listen to that, and you pay attention to the outside, and you listen to the celebrities and the public figures and the this and the that and whatever it may be. But really, that's all bullshit. Like
Yep,
it's really listening to
absolutely.
you and listening to your intuition and connecting to yourself to say, does this resonate? Like, do I really? And I got caught up in that too. Like, like when people say to me, like, oh, it's so easy to say that. I'm like, look, I like, I'm a normal person too. Like, I worked in Hollywood for many years. I got caught up in all of it and then some, and drank the Kool-Aid and this, that, and the other thing. And, and those were hard questions for me to ask myself when things felt stale and when things felt like they didn't align anymore and it didn't feel right. And I had to say to myself, well, why is that? And it was hard to like go back to me and be like, okay, well, then that means that maybe I don't align with this anymore. And then that means that I'm not maybe going to be the top of my game with this anymore. And that was an ego thing. That was like,
Yeah,
oh, I mean, and
yeah.
it's hard, right? Your
Well, it's
ego
a
wants to
real thing.
protect you.
Yeah.
It wants to tell you that like, no, 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 stay here.
Mhm.
And I think that like what you were saying with that, those downloads, when you get those like higher self, those are like the quiet voice inside of you that are like, no, listen to what I'm telling you because I'm really trying to guide you, versus your screaming ego who's like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, it's so true, and because the ego is a real thing. I mean, I went through that when I left corporate. I'd worked very hard
Yeah.
to, get that nice, powerful
That
title.
corporate ladder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you get the title, you do feel a little powerful, like it gets you indoors, whatever, whatever. And when I left that and started my company, I mean, I started with nothing. I was, back
Most
cold
of us
calling.
do.
I was like doing it all, and
Yeah.
it was hard. It actually
Yeah.
took me probably a year and a half to even tell people what I did. It was just
Oh,
crazy.
I, I,
And I
I
didn't even
trust me, I
understand what was
found.
going on. I
Yeah.
was like, why am I ashamed? I should be proud that but it was a weird transition. And I think it's funny because that was 4.5 years ago. And I'm just now launching the next phase of my business, which is coaching 2 corporations. So I'm kind of
Uh-huh.
coming
So
back
cool.
full
Full
circle.
circle. It always
Yeah.
does.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so funny because it's almost 5 years, right? And 5 years is my
Wow.
thing where I'm like,
Yeah. So
time to do
cool.
it, time to keep it going. But I love that you've been kind of following that your entire life as well. And so where did it lead you next after you had kind of like gone in and been like, I love fashion, I'm crushing it. I also love that you did these different avenues too. You didn't just kind of stick to one. You were really
Yeah.
learning every piece of it, which is part of part of our education for whatever's next is
Yeah.
getting knowledge kind of across the board. Sometimes you don't even know why. Sometimes it
Right.
might not make sense, but then the next phase opens up and you're like, oh, so glad
Oh,
I know all
yes.
that.
Yes, totally. Yeah. Well, so then going back to then, stock market crashing and then me kind of really having to ask myself, like, okay, what am I going to do? Because I'm not going to go home. I just had too much pride. And I was like, I got to pay for my apartment outside of New York City in Hoboken, which is expensive, and, figure out my life and this, that, and the other thing. And I started calling around friends and everything. And I said, like, hey, I've always wanted to check out the entertainment industry. I don't even know where to start, but who can maybe introduce me to somebody, or who can give me some kind of mentorship or whatever, because I literally have nothing right now. I started my master's online for fashion, just figuring, hey, I'll just further my education. So I started that, but I was still feeling stale when I was doing it. So it was more just like, I'll just do it because I feel like, hey, at least I'm doing something and not sitting around. I'm someone who can't sit around. So it was like, I really had to just like wrestle with that. And then I had some friends and family who introduced me to some people in the entertainment industry, network wise. And I went and had an interview for a movie that was coming into New York, Wall Street Money Never Sleeps, which was my first film I worked on as a production assistant. And I sat down with the famous and amazing and insane Oliver Stone and his team. And they were like, look, we don't care about fashion. I'll wait, you'll laugh. So I'll paint you a picture. So when I showed up at my interview, I was like, thinking fashion and this, that, the other thing. So I'm in like high heels, cute tights. I think they were like black with like little like pink dots or something. I remember. And I had like Mary Jane, like high heels. And I had on, a cute like sweater because it was like fall, and like big, bag when the chokers were like huge, like big, thick choker. And, like just super done up my hair and makeup and the whole thing. And I had like bright pink lipstick on. And I remember walking in there and sitting down, and they were like, all right, show us your resume. And so I'm going on and on about fashion. And they're like, yeah, we don't care about fashion. We just need, I remember sitting there being like, what,
Right. You're like, hold up.
yeah, what's happening? And they were like, we just need someone who literally will be our bitch girl. Like, we need someone to just go and get donuts, coffee, listen when we ask them to, maybe go feed someone's cat, do a grocery run. And I was like, oh. And I was really humbled in that moment.
Sure, yeah, because
Because I
especially
was
after
sitting
your career at
there.
that point, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I was sitting there and I'm like, okay, I worked in Target and I was like the top chick about to go district. I just did all these designs for Coach. I was the top of my game. Lacoste. I redid all these prints. Like I helped them invent a whole new bag. Like, and I'm sitting here going like, and I'm gonna start from the bottom, basically making like barely any money, not even doing fashion. For what? Like I was like sitting there
Right.
like,
Yep.
but then the other part of me was like, but you have nothing else. You know what I mean? Like,
And also opportunity.
right.
Opportunity comes in all kinds of forms,
That's right.
and like
That's right.
most people would let their ego get in the way
And I
and
almost
like,
did. Honestly, I almost
yeah,
did, because I was sitting there and they're like telling me it's like small pay and it's like 18 hours a day. And I'm like, where the frick am I?
you're like, this is fucking nuts. No, thank you.
Right. Exactly. I'm like, what the fuck is happening? I'm ready to kill my friends and family. And so,
Yeah.
and so they were like, do you want it? And I remember sitting there almost being like, no. And then I was like, okay. And they're like, yeah, they're like, you start next Monday. And they were like, we need you at 5 a.m. And I was like, okay, and it was like game on, and my first day I showed up there, and I, of course I dressed super cute, regardless. And they're like, oh, you should probably wear sneakers or flats because you're running like crazy. And I was like, and so, and I'm standing there and Oliver Stone looks at me and he's like, nice to meet you. Just don't fuck up. And I'm like, and he's like,
Like,
yeah,
wow,
he's
okay.
no joke. There's a reason why that man is so successful. And so he looks at me and his team and he's like, what do you guys want? They give their coffee orders. Long story short, I go to the coffee, I go to Starbucks, I go get their coffee orders, I come back. One of the orders was supposed to be like, light with no whip, meaning like no whipped cream and the whole
Yeah.
thing. And Oliver Stone takes a sip and he like spits it out. And I'm like horrified. And he's like, why is there whip on this? And I'm like,
Wow.
yeah, that was like talk about the ego. Woo!
Yeah, and you're like, whoa, I just got knocked down every peg.
That's right, exactly. And he was like, go back and fix it. And and I'm like trying to hold back my tears, and he's like, I can't give you money because I already gave you like the petty cash, like, which is the money they give you on a set. And he's like, so you have to just go handle it. And I'm like, okay. And I like, run over the Starbucks. I'm hysterical crying now in front of these people at Starbucks, which is another like major ego. Like here I am crying in front of everybody. And they're like, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. We'll give you a free will, like chill, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, fixing my
Yeah.
makeup in the bathroom, check the cup 100 million times, go back, give it back to him. He's like, all right, that's right. Good job. And I'm like, oh my God. And that was the start of my first day for 6 months into my first job as a production assistant in the movie industry. And it was a very humbling moment for me because I went from being like this known hot shot to
Mhm.
nobody. It was
Yeah.
literally like, nobody cares who you are.
Yep.
Nobody knows you. You
Yep.
better work your ass off to stay here. This is your only job. You have no other options. It's either that or unemployment, which me personally was not an option.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, I guess I'm gonna figure this out. And it was one of the hardest jobs I ever had. But can I tell you, Sarah, it was one of the most humbling and rewarding to this day because it
Yep.
reminds me to constantly work hard. It reminds me also, even as a boss to other people, how to be and how to show them, without, beating them up, how to
Yep.
like train them right, but like show them how to work. And it honestly, I mean, to this day, I'm so grateful for that opportunity, and it opened so many doors. I did a great job. I had, of course, some other hiccups, but I learned, and
Yeah.
I did a great job. And they referred me on to other movies. And also, besides that, after a few months of working in just coffee and donuts and scripts, Oliver Stone and the team said, look, you've done a great job. We're going to let you work part-time in the costume department. And I got to go meet the
Awesome.
costume designer, Mirage, famous costume designer. And I got to have all these amazing opportunities. And that's what led me into other movies and
Yeah.
television in New York and meeting, on other shows and getting to have all these opportunities. And so you just never know, you never know what that one window or that one door is going to do when it opens for you. And had I said no, like I probably wouldn't have wound up in with a team in Atlanta
Right.
that ended up being from LA, who told me to go to LA, which is how I wound up in LA, and then ended up on a set where, realized I was kind of feeling stale again in the movies and costume. And I was like, okay, I don't love what I'm doing, but like, here I am in LA, like, what am I doing?
Right.
And I met people on that team that were like, oh, you should look into styling. And I was like, I don't really know what that is. I've seen Rachel Zoe, she has this show. And they were like, yeah, but you'd be really good at it. It's this, that, and the other thing. And so then I started all over again, had to humble myself all over again and say, okay, I'm going to go intern for Monica Rose, the Kardashians,
Yeah.
and Kanye West tour and all these people. But again, started over. And I think for me, having to start over several times in my career, like what you were speaking to, the constant reinventing, that
Yeah.
was something I just had to constantly get used to because the universe, for whatever reason, just kept knocking me on my ass. Every time something would happen, it was like, oh, no, you're not humbled enough. So now you're going to do this. No, this is going to happen. And it was a lot of learning for me, And so I think now, fast forward to all the different jobs and hats that I wear, I can almost humble myself and say, like, I was telling my husband the other day because I was doing coaching for myself, like getting coached for this one TV thing that I'm doing because I do a lot of TV segments.
Yeah.
And there's this one project that I was being coached for because I felt like I could use some coaching, and I always think it's good to invest in yourself and your
Yeah.
career because we can always get better, right?
Right.
And so I'm talking to him, and after I finished, after my husband, I'm like, I had to really check my ego in there, and he's like, why? And I'm like, because I felt like I really knew what I was talking about, but he kept really like knocking me down and being like, nope, speak to this, nope, speak to that. And I said, I had to really like sit with myself and say, wow, like you do know what you're talking about, but you're still like learning, even though you have so many years
Yes. Yeah.
under your belt, and that was a really big moment for me. And so I think that for me, like you said, like I'm always constantly evolving, I'm constantly reinventing myself. And I think I've also switched in my own mind with like mindset. Like I no longer look at it as just work, I look at it as creating. And I think when you
Yeah.
change that vibration and that frequency of like I'm creating versus I'm working, it just
Right.
changes everything.
Yeah. And I love so much. I mean, there's so much in there that you said that I can resonate with. And the first thing I want to start with is having the openness and the adaptability to be able to start over. And so many people are so terrified of that, that they would rather stay in a career they despise for 30 years, versus having to start over. And I think there's something really amazing about starting over. Not only the points that you mentioned, which I think one of them is really critical, which is you have to have worked at the bottom at something in your life
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
order to know how to treat people when you rise.
That's
And
right.
because there's nothing that I hate more than being around really rich people or,
Yeah,
celebrities and watching them treat people like shit and having no idea what it would be like to be in that person's
that's
shoes. Like,
right.
I just can't tolerate that at all. But the thing is, a lot of people haven't ever been in those shoes. So I think the ability to work up from wherever it is that you're starting gives you perspective. It teaches you how to treat people. It teaches you how to be a better leader. All of those things, which you just can't learn any other way. I feel like,
No, you can't. It's just
especially
real
that's
life, right? It's literally
yeah,
real life. And I joke when people ask me things, I'm like, dude, I literally was baptized by fire. Like that's just what it
Mhm.
was. I just jumped right in and as you said, in each new endeavor, in each new, career and move. I mean, even when I became a mom, it was like, here I'm a new mom. I thought I was gonna go right back to styling. I thought I was gonna get right back on set. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I was gonna get right back on I thought I was gonna get right back on set. Ego, right? I
Yep.
was gonna get right back on set. 2 weeks later, my birth was like a disaster, traumatic. That's a whole nother story. And so I was bedbound, and bedridden for like almost, 3 weeks. I didn't drive for 9 weeks. So it was like, yeah, okay, throw that out the
You're
window.
not going anywhere.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere. You're going to stay home right here and not move, which I believe the universe did on purpose to
Yeah.
humble me. And
Yep.
and it's crazy because like I think about then when I went back to set and then I wasn't even happy on set. It felt stale and I felt like I'm missing my daughter and I don't want to be here. And I no longer like had this like resonance that I had before of like being excited to be around all these people and the glam. I was like, I want to be home in my pajamas with my daughter. And it was such a weird experience for me because it was like, wait, what am I talking about? Like I was so excited to get back to
Yeah.
set, and I had to like really sit with myself when I got home and be like, okay, you know what? Like, then what am I going to do? And that was hard because it was like, this has been my career for so long,
Right.
and thank God I did have a team. I do have a team around me, built it over the years. And I turned my team and I said, I'll still style, but I'm not going to style every day and I'm not going to be on set every day. What does this look like for me? I know, of course, I need assistance. Is that the other thing? But like, what else can I do? And I was starting to already do the TV segments for a few years. So they were great that they were like, let's talk motherhood on camera. Let's change, and again, I do believe, like you said in the beginning, when you align with your passion, you align with what really helps yourself and others, and you're really serving in one way or another, God source, whatever you want to say, for me, it's God,
Yeah.
really does align you with what you should be doing, even if it's not what you were doing originally. And so I
Yeah.
do
It's like
believe
bubbles to the top
yeah,
almost. Like it shows
exactly.
itself. It shows itself when
Exactly.
you
It finds itself and it
Mhm.
evolves, right? And so for me, that's what happened. It was like all of a sudden I started doing more TV stuff and then my postpartum depression hit. That was obviously not planned or expected. And I had no idea sharing that experience would lead to me then being a sought on mommy influencer. And I quote because I think influencer is such an annoying word, but which I know everyone like is like, why? And I'm like, because I just don't like that it's like influence because we just talked about this entire conversation about how we listen to the outside too much and don't
Yeah.
listen to
Yeah.
ourselves. And so I have a major issue with thinking I'm like quote unquote influencing
Yeah.
someone.
You could be like, I'm an educator, or I'm
Yes,
sharing,
I'm
Yeah,
empowering, I'm
empowering.
inspiring, like that's how I feel. And so
Yeah.
to be known as this like top, mommy influencer and blogger, I was like, okay, and so of course you wrestle with the ego of like, oh, that's huge. And then the other part of it's like, oh, but I don't really resonate with that. And so, but I realized that like I tapped into me sharing all the time about my experiences and what was, I was having a hard time with motherhood, my postpartum depression, and wrestling with my own demons and my own ego within styling. And so sharing that is what led to then that shift in my career to be sharing all of those things so raw and vulnerable because many, I guess, choose not to do that or don't want to.
Yeah. Right.
And I felt like for me, I didn't really choose it. I feel like it was chosen for me and I just started sharing. And then that's how my podcast happened. And so it just kind of evolved from there, and I never really planned to be, an on camera, expert and TV personality. I didn't plan to be an influencer sharing my life and being such an open book. Like these were not things that if you had asked me years ago, oh, would you be doing these things? I'd be like, no, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
now it's just part of me. And I just keep
Right.
kind of going with it and evolving and sharing, as I go along. And so when people say to me, like, how do you constantly change what you're doing? I'm like, honestly, now I feel like I just go with the flow. I
Where
no
the
longer
inspiration is. Follow the
yeah, it's so
inspiration.
different inspiration and intuition. And I think too, like what you were saying with like connecting to yourself, it's like you just feel that evolvement and it's for you and you just go with it. Versus I feel like when you are an ego, like we were saying, you force it, right? Everything's forced.
Yes.
I must get
Yes.
this, I have to hit this. I remember in styling, like even when I would get best dressed for my clients, it was like I had to hit this magazine. I had to and I didn't even give myself time to celebrate the wins that I
Right.
was having. And I think that now that because as as a mom, like you are humbled majorly. And I think, in my opinion, you're reborn every time you have a child. And so I think between my two girls, I've really been not only humbled, but really awakened to so much now that I've learned to really how to handle my ego. And I still have that dance, we all do, but I'm more awake and conscious to when it's going on and how to walk myself away from those limiting beliefs and to allow myself to connect back to intuition. And when I feel myself spinning in a moment, sit with myself and just breathe and say, okay, what voice is screaming at you right now and what voice is kind of just that quiet voice that's trying to tell you like what's really going on.
Yeah, and I think, for me, making those changes and kind of following that intuition now is part of the excitement of life, right?
Yeah,
It's almost like I do something as long as I feel on fire about it,
I
and
love that.
as soon as I kind of start to feel, and I'll let it go a little bit just to make sure it's not one of those little slumps. We all have
Yeah,
those,
yeah.
right?
We all have, as entrepreneurs, I feel like you have to get used to those slumps because in the
Yeah, you
beginning,
have
I
those.
was like, why am I constantly now? I'm like, oh, entrepreneur life. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But then when you kind of go through a prolonged one and you're like, wait a second, like you said, I'm not enjoying this the way, I'm not getting the thrill of it the way that I used to.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's not hitting those
It's
spots.
stale. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the kind of, for me, the indicator that it's time to change and time to move.
Yeah. Switch it
And
up.
yeah, exactly. And I think, like you said, motherhood changes so much. So
Everything. Everything.
for listeners, and there's a lot of other big moments in our life that changes. Getting married is one
Of
that
course.
changes
Of
things.
course.
Moving cross country, which I know you've done multiple
Yeah.
times, it looks like, is a big one. For me, I'm going through the opposite of what you're going through. I just took my son to college on
Oh,
Saturday, which
I
is a
can't even imagine the emotions.
girl. And everyone will tell you this and you'll be like, yeah, 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 whatever. It goes by so much faster than you
Yeah.
can begin to fathom.
Yeah.
It's like, you were head down surviving and then it's
Right.
done.
All of a sudden
It's
it's
done.
done.
Yeah.
Right. Like the
So
next chapter of your life. Yeah.
yeah. So part of, I think my awareness, in the motherhood space, and I've been a single mom, for 13 years since my son was 5.
Super mom.
Yeah. And I think I always in the back of my head felt time ticking. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like even on the bad days, even on the days when I wanted to go scream in a pillow or be like, oh my God, I can't handle this. I always had that sense of like, you're gonna want this day back. Even
yeah.
this day, you're gonna
Yes.
want this day
Even this
back. So,
bad day. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
So go breathe,
Yeah.
go do what you gotta do,
Yeah.
and show up because it's going to be gone before you know it. And I would love to talk about the ways in which motherhood, has changed you, as a woman. And, like you said, the good and the bad. Postpartum is really tough. I think I definitely went through that with my twins. For sure, they were cesarean, so I didn't really bond with them initially because I was
Mhm,
literally out
mhm.
for
Yeah.
like the
Of
first
course.
six
Trauma.
years or 6 hours of their life. I was
Yeah.
not going to
It's
wake.
like trauma right away.
Yeah. So, it changes so much. So how is it, what have those changes been like adapting to that? Because that is different than adapting to all the different career stuff that you've
Oh
gotten
yeah.
good at. This is, no one
Yeah.
can prepare you for whatever it is we feel when we go
No,
through it.
and even when we feel like we've got it down, it changes, right? Like
Yeah.
immediately you're like, oh, this works. And it's like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah. And half the time we don't even know what we're feeling or why we're feeling it. We're like, what is
Yep.
going on?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that so first off, I love this question because I think that in the beginning in motherhood, I just felt like I was drowning all the time and I felt like I was not a good mom and that I couldn't be a career woman and a mom and be successful at both and that society tells you that too. And I just felt like I listened to all of that. Like I absorbed all of that and with my postpartum depression, I like really went dark and I was like, well, I'm just going to be a mom and nothing wrong with that because there's several moms that are just moms and that is a full-time flipping job in itself. But for me, being a woman who was always on the go and loving being an entrepreneur, I really wanted to be both. And I felt like I really had to give up because for me, there was no giving up on Amelia. And so I think that when I went through my postpartum depression and I really like experienced that darkness and I turned to my husband and I said, I feel like I'm mourning the death of me was when he really realized like something was wrong. And I looked at him like, well, it's fine. I'm just that part of Allie's gone and I'm just a mom and like that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was normal. I was like, well,
Right.
I'm just gonna be a
Right.
mom and that's that. And I think when I got through the postpartum depression and came out, thank God on the other side, I think that, a lot of my postpartum depression therapy was cognitive therapy, was mindfulness,
Yeah.
was meditation, breath work, gratitude work, journaling, like all the people want to call woo stuff that I personally don't think is very woo.
Oh my
Um,
God, I think it's science. I think it's like, how do
it
people live
is, it is,
without these
it
tools?
changes your mindset. It changes your brain. Like anyone listening, like I was that person years ago that thought it was woo. And
Yep.
now I'm so grateful I have done all that because my mind will never ever be in that place ever
Yeah.
again. It's like you become awake to
Yeah,
everything.
it's life skills. It's life
Yes,
skills that every human being should be taught, like
yes,
they're taught math or how to read,
right. That's
because
right.
that's how you manage life is
That's right,
having
exactly. Your
skills.
mindset's how you tap into your higher consciousness. It's how you're aware of everything. It's how that you know how to take out the noise. It's how you handle what's going on when everything is around you spinning because life
How
is not
you
always
feel
rainbows.
joy,
Yes,
how
exactly.
you tap
All
into
of it.
happiness, all of
Yes.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, and real happiness, right? Not the materials they wanna sell us, not the
right,
things they wanna tell us bring us happiness. Those are all things we enjoy, obviously, me, fashion stylist, of course I do. But it
right,
doesn't mean it's what actually makes you happy. And that was something I also wrestled with was, like, always, like, during the postpartum depression, like, buying things for myself to fulfill myself, and then I'm not realizing why I wasn't fulfilled. And it was, like, because I wasn't happy. It had nothing to do with the fact that I loved the material things I was getting, but it had nothing
right.
to do with me. And so I think that, going through all that really humbled me, but also empowered me. And it showed me as a mom that, like, I can do it all. I probably can't do it all at once, but I
Mhm.
can. But I just have to find, I don't want to say balance, harmony, rhythm, whatever. Just
Right,
find a way to do it. And there's still like some days where I'm killing it as an entrepreneur and some days where I'm killing it as a mom. And there's very seldom days where I'm doing both.
yeah,
But you know what? You just find those priorities, you find the windows, and if you really want it, you figure it out, and show up for yourself, right? First and foremost. That was something I had to learn was like really not only showing up for Amelia, but like showing up for Allie and showing up for me and really doing, inner child work on myself of like, how do I show up to be good and kind to Allie and do what I need to do so I can show up for everybody else and be a better woman and wife and mom and all the things, to be able to move forward. And I think that in motherhood, in the beginning, it's really scary, obviously. And it's like, what the fuck did I get myself into?
right,
And what is this? And why do I feel like this? And your hormones are out of whack. And there's just so much going on that you literally feel like you're spinning and you're like, I don't know how I'm gonna even survive one day. And you got breastfeeding out there. And then the list just goes on.
right.
And and your body went through a car wreck and you're supposed to pretend like it's no big
Exactly.
deal and you're supposed to bounce back. And I mean, there's
Yep,
so many things we could talk about. But I think on a much heavier, like spiritual level, you really are, in my opinion, reborn. And you have to almost like realize this rebirth and see that as actually something as you were saying earlier when we were chatting about this new beginning, right? That it doesn't have to
yeah,
be bad. It doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't have to be scary. It may feel it, but you can embrace it. And I think that once I finally switched that mindset and came into these are new experiences, these are new adventures, I'm going to experience a lot of this with Amelia, I'm going to change a lot of these things. I started feeling more empowered and I
yeah,
started seeing other women around me feel empowered. And that's when things started to change for me. And there were days where I'd wake up and I'd be like, I just can't show up today. And it was like, you know what? I gave myself that grace and said, I'm just going to
yeah,
focus on Amelia today. I'm not going to force myself to show up on social media. I took 2 months off social media. Everybody was like, where'd she go? And I had to because I couldn't even show up for me, let alone show up for the
right,
world online,
right,
And I
right.
think we put so much pressure on ourselves, especially as moms, where we feel like we have to always do every
All
single
the
thing.
things. It's like,
And if you
no.
don't, you're this, you're that. And it's like, no, put that noise outside and just know it's noise and know like you're doing everything you can. That next thing will be there if it's meant for you. Not everything that comes is an opportunity. That was another one I had to swallow, especially as a new mom. Like so many things were coming at me and I was trying to learn how to handle everything. And it was like, but is this really an opportunity or is this a distraction? Is this really something I align with? Or is my ego just saying, oh, you should just do it because like you need to distract yourself from actually dealing with everything else going on? And I think that when we empower ourselves with that kind of knowledge and tell ourselves, like, I am changing, I am shifting, I am becoming a new version of myself. I maybe don't like those things anymore. I maybe don't feel good in certain things that I used to wear. It's okay. Embrace it. Know that this is a new chapter. You're not supposed to be the same person. You're hopefully going to evolve and move forward and grow, and your children are be part of that growth. And I think fast forward to then having Arlie, my second, I not only had a VBAC, with my second daughter, which is a vaginal birth after a C-section, for those that don't know, but that alone was so massively empowering for me. So many people told me that would never happen. Once a C-section, always a C-section, the whole 9 yards. And I empowered myself to do so much mindset training to tell myself, no, I can make this happen. And I trust my body, I trust myself, I trust Allie. And it did. And I think going through that for me, not only was also another rebirth, but it was like, yes, look at how powerful you are. You've always had this power within you. Your daughters have only now helped you and taken this out of you and shown you because now you have to show up and be that powerful for your children or for your child. And so I believe that we're given that extra strength to actually show to our kids if we actually choose to tap into it. And so I think for me, I've gone from that scary place of like being, like I can't do anything and I'm struggling and I can barely get out of bed and I'm crying every day and looking at myself in the mirror. I hate my body. To now finally coming to a place where I'm like, okay, I don't love my body, but I did have 2 babies in the last couple of years. So like give myself
Yeah.
grace. Okay, I can't get myself together every day. I don't look like this every day, but it's okay because I'm a busy entrepreneur, working woman, and the house is a mess because I can't get to it today. But you know what? I got this done and this paid this bill. And I think just having those conversations within yourself and empowering yourself and knowing how good a job you are doing. And as long as like they're thriving and you're thriving, it's all that matters. Everything else is noise,
Yeah.
it
I
really
mean,
is.
I love how much you've touched on mindset because as my audience knows, that's my fucking jam. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, it was something that I didn't know anything about until I had my earthquake moment when my husband left 13 years ago.
Mhm.
And since then, I've learned how to do it. I've learned how to teach it. And it just changes everything. I've been
Everything.
coaching my
Everything.
kids on it. My
I
son.
love that. I've been doing that with my toddler. I
Oh
love
my
that.
God, from day one, like I really started teaching them how to talk nice to themselves, how to never say negative things about
Yeah.
themselves, how to
Yeah.
never say negative things about each other, just all of those
Yeah.
pieces.
Being conscious of what you're, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just crazy how much it changes everything. You said something a little bit ago about really working on your mindset and showing up as a parent and just think about this from a logical perspective. If we're tearing ourselves down all day long, if we're saying
Yeah.
you're a shit mom, you let your baby cry for 2 more minutes, or you were frustrated when you changed that diaper, you were this, that, or the other, right? Like we have this internal dialogue that can just rip us apart all day long.
All day long.
How are we supposed to show up as our best
That's
mom
right.
self, right?
Right.
Just think about it
And would you let
logically. How
anybody
does that
else
make
talk
sense?
to you that way? Like, would you let anyone else talk to you that way? No, but somehow
Right.
like we let ourselves tear us up. And that was one of my first things in therapy was like, so you think these horrible things about yourself. Like I had to write down in a notebook, like
Yeah.
all the things I was thinking, and it was horrifying.
Right.
And they were like, so you think all these things about yourself. How are you supposed to even show up and act like, normal self and even be a good example for your daughter if you think all these things about yourself?
Exactly.
And also, like, if anyone came to you and said that to you, wouldn't you be like, "Get the F out of my house?" Like,
Be like,
you know?
let's go. Let's go.
Right,
Like,
right,
yeah. I
you know?
think that's the thing that always just kind of blows me away. And when I'm teaching people kind of like how to change that mindset,
Yeah,
to me, it's just a logical thing. It's like, it doesn't matter if you believe it's true or don't believe it's true. Just think about it super, super logically. If I tell myself I'm shit at something, how much harder is it going to be for me to be good at it? That's
that's
like
right.
swimming up a waterfall. It's going to be 10 times harder to do. Like I'm just
So true.
making it harder
Right,
than
and
just
you say
try
something enough,
alone.
right? You believe it, right? Even if it's not the truth, say it over and over and over again, it becomes the truth, even if it maybe
Yeah.
isn't the truth. So if you keep saying the same negative thing over and over and over again, guess what? That's gonna become your truth. It's gonna become your reality. You will consume that. That will become part of you, whether you like it or not.
Yep. And as soon as it becomes a belief system, the belief system is the thing that's going to manifest the fastest
That's right.
and most accurately. And it'll just keep happening and happening until you change it.
Yeah, because your energy and your thoughts create your reality. And people want to say,
Yeah.
oh no, well, this, that. And I'm like, no, it really is. It's like even me, like there are times where it'll be slow and things are not happening. And I'm like, oh, okay, what am I gonna do this month? And being entrepreneur projects, and I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go there anymore. I'm gonna think about being abundant. I'm gonna think about the projects I want to create, what I want to come in. Does it always happen? No, not always, but most of the time, something will align because
Yep.
I was open to it and because I had those positive thoughts around it and was already speaking it out versus saying nothing's going to happen. Oh, it's going to be a slow month. And guess what? It is.
It always
It's
is.
not
It
going to be in
always
the
is.
past. It
Yeah.
always is. Yep.
Yep. I always tell people if you don't believe in any of this stuff, all you have to do is look at your last 10 years and see your biggest like sore spots or
Yeah.
your biggest stress things and just ask yourself, what do I normally think about that stuff every day? Boom.
There you go.
It's an
That's so
exact
true.
ratio. It's
That's
an
right.
exact ratio. It's
That's a
like,
great example.
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever I've been stressing about is exactly my current reality. So it's
Right.
like,
Yep.
we're not making this shit up. It's actually real.
Exactly. And it's actually really not that complicated when you actually dive
No,
into it. You're like, oh, I have control.
it's
I,
so
I have
basic.
power. What?
Yeah. So how did you when you really started kind of learning this stuff, what were some of the tools that you used to change it? I mean, I use mottos, I use
Yeah,
mantras,
yeah,
all
for
kinds of stuff.
sure.
Write it down. What are some of the
Yeah,
things?
affirmations are huge for me. I do affirmations daily. I also do affirmations with my daughters every day in the mirror. I
Yep.
have a little rose spray. I spray on them, or amethyst. And my toddler asks them, Amelia will say affirmations, and we'll stand there and, you're beautiful, you're brave, you're bright, and that's for me as well. Prayer meditation is a big one. I also recently heavily got into sound frequency. So I listen to different frequencies. Oh my God, I'll send you, I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed. Yeah, I'll send you. I'll ask if I can give my discount for your show if your listeners
Yeah,
want to check it
that
out.
would be awesome. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm obsessed. It's called soak, and honestly, like I soak in the sound now. What I like is like, whereas meditation, you have to be so still and like really be concentrating, which is great, but not we don't always, especially as moms, have that time. I love that I can just turn it on, whether it's on when the girls are playing and all of a sudden I'm down, or I'm doing something I have it in my ears. Like I immediately feel the shift. So I've
Yeah.
been really big into that right now, which makes sense to me because I'm like, okay, well, our energy with the frequency, with vibrations, like to me, it all ties in. So it makes sense that I'm feeling that shift. So I really love that. I also love breath work. I have found such a difference in my life in doing breath work. I feel like we forget that our breath actually really is our drug. And like, if we connect to that, and think about that with the mindset, like forget it. There's no messing with you. Like
Yep.
it's over, game over.
So powerful.
So that's a big one for me. And then I have a journal that I journal in, not as every day like I used to, but I try to check in with myself and just kind of write down my feelings. I like that it asks me questions like, what are you affirming today? What do you want to affirm tomorrow? What do you want to bring in? And then it makes me sign it. So I'm like really
Cool.
affirming,
Love
like,
that.
yeah, like this is what I'm saying. I'm affirming to it. And then at the bottom it says, and what do you want to bring in tomorrow? And what did you learn from today? So it really makes you kind of go past, present, future real
Yeah.
fast, but
Love that.
like to be very like
Intentional.
attentive to it. Yes,
Yeah. And
exactly. Yeah.
awake. Yeah. And
So I think all
really,
those things and just mindfulness practices, right? Like just in general, anytime I feel myself spinning, being really conscious. I used to just spin and let myself spin. And now I know I can't, especially because I had postpartum depression. So I have to be on top of it and say, nope, I'm spinning for a reason. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go play and let my inner child come out with my daughters. I'm going to go get a green drink, whatever it is. I'm going to go do something to make myself feel good instead of sitting here spinning and not having it be anything. And sometimes I have to tell myself too, like rest is productive. And I think that was another big one that I had to really wake up to when I went through all this was like, it's okay to rest. It's okay just to
yes.
just be and just be present. And our world loves to tell us that that's not okay because you have to constantly be climbing this and doing this. And I think the pandemic in a way was such a blessing because it showed all us like you can hit the pause button. Like you
Mhm.
can find your,
There is more
center.
to life.
Yes,
There is
yes,
interaction. It's
yes,
important. Like
yes,
real life people matter.
yes, that's right.
Yeah, all
You know?
all of those things. I am obsessed with Europe, and I've taken my kids a couple times, and eventually I want to live in Italy. But
Oh, yeah.
a big piece of it is because of their whole
Yeah, their whole mindset.
lifestyle
Yeah,
philosophy. It's not
totally
about,
different.
yeah. And I think Americans think, oh, well, that's just lazy, and you can't be abundant.
Yes,
And
that's
that,
right.
but
They
those are
do.
the think like they're all about living a great lifestyle, and
Right, right.
I totally
They're
believe.
they're they're enjoying life way more than we are.
Yeah, you can have it both ways. You just have to understand what is of value to you and like
Yes,
make
yes,
time for it. And if
yes.
you do, you will have I believe in balance. I really do. I know it's crazy, but I believe that it's possible for all of us. We just have to put value on the things that make
I
our
love
life
you said that
balance.
about value. It's right. It's more than just priorities. It's actual value of like what is actually bringing me joy, what is actually working with my family, what are all those questions. But I think a lot of times these are hard questions for most people to have with themselves. And in
Great.
my opinion, I believe that's what we're dealing with as a collective right now. I
Yep.
think that there's a lot of hard questions being asked of all of us right now. And those that are choosing to kind of push aside and just continue to listen to the noise and be fed different things, they're feeling it the hardest right now
Yep.
because they're not connecting back to themselves and they're just listening to whatever else is going on. And so they're being fed these constant programs and then they believe them. Like you said, it becomes a belief system. And
Mhm.
so I really believe that's kind of like what we're breaking out of right now on a really heavy spiritual level.
Yep. And if you listeners are feeling that way, I mean, I think that one of the first things that you can start to do is get out your journal and start
Yeah.
logging what you're
Yes.
thinking, start
Yes.
logging what you're feeling, like
Get
get
it
it out
out.
of
Just
your
get it
head.
out. Yes.
Yes, get it out of
Yes.
your head, get it on paper. As soon as you do that, you can start to make sense of it. You can
That's
start
right.
to see some
And you
patterns.
feel clear, right? All of a sudden the fog and the spinning and all the things, you're like, oh, I can feel clear, or I feel nothing, but at least there's nothing up there to continuously spin, right? Like
Right.
for postpartum depression, same thing. They were like, the first week it was like just right. And I was like, what? And I couldn't believe how much I wrote and
Oh
how
my
heavy
God.
it was. It
Yes.
was like, oh my gosh. But it made me, like you said, it makes you see it, right? Once that you see it, you can't unsee it. You're like, oh,
You can process it
oh,
in a completely different way than when you're spinning it in your head.
yes.
It's completely different, and you can let it go in a way that
That's
you
right.
never
That's right.
can.
You can see it, release it, and let it go.
You
Yes.
can change it. Oh my
Yes.
God, I've loved this conversation. I could go on and on and on forever.
I know, I love you. You have to come on my show. I'm gonna have to have you on my podcast.
Yes, I would absolutely love, love, love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and your story and your light with all of us. Guys, go follow, go do all the stuff. So where can everybody learn the most about you and be part of your journey?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love this conversation. It lit me up as well. I love seeing people come together that I really believe are light workers in this time and helping people shift the way the narrative's been for a long time.
Yes.
So you can follow me at ALILEVINE Design. I'm mostly on Instagram, but I have Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, TikTok, all the platforms. But I try to mostly spend my time on one platform, Instagram. ALILEVINE Design. Everything with Ali Levine is my podcast. So check out wherever you listen to this amazing podcast. You can check out mine. It's a very real and raw conversation about all the things we kind of just talked about: wellness, spiritual, motherhood. I touch on it all. We get deep. And my website's alilevine.com. I do style everyday people, mostly remote now. So if you do want to be styled or have your closet worked on or just get a consult, you can reach out to me, either DM me or reach out on my website. And if this resonated with you, please say hello. I love to meet fellow, like-minded people. And I love to help empower others who are maybe in this, like you were saying, rut of figuring things out. Please feel free to say hello. It's so much fun to get to connect with everyone.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for being on. Go listen to the show, you guys. I am so excited to listen to it as well. And thank you for sharing everything with us today. Guys, get out there and hustle and thrive.